Good evening, Franklin Township, and welcome to the Franklin Reporter and Advocate News Hour for what used to be Tax Day, April 15th, 2021. I am Bill Bowman, the co-publisher and editor of the Franklin Reporter and Advocate, and with me is...
This is PJ Parker, also the co-publisher, but the advertising director of the Franklin Reporter and Advocate, and we welcome you to tonight's interesting, timely topic.
Yes, we're going to be talking about the, I guess it's not in full form yet, it's still in its beta form, but it recently unveiled, and you have to wonder why they would unveil something if it's not really ready for prime time, but that's another question. But anyway, the recently unveiled use of force police use of force database put out by the State Attorney General's office. It is a compilation of use of force reports from police departments across the state in database form. Actually, I can at least give you what the dashboard, as they call it, looks like. And basically, you have an opportunity to choose by county, by town, or by officer's name. And I in this example here, I picked Somerset County, obviously. You can see the names of the towns listed, and you would pick one of these towns, and then the incidents that have been reported in this batch from October to February would come up. Now, you'll see Franklin's not in this, and it was my mistake, and I thought initially that was because we didn't have any, but as we will find out, we did. So I think that's a good segue to introduce our guests. We have the Public Safety Director, Hovella Spruill, and we also have Captain Phil Rizzo, who is in charge of the Professional Standards Bureau, and I think we used to call those things internal affairs. So we're going to bring Director Spruill and Captain Rizzo on board. Hello, welcome to the News Hour.
Yes,
Good evening.
thank you for taking your time we know you're very busy days to do this with us.
Yes. So thanks very much for doing that. So I don't know if you heard the introduction here, but I have had conversations with Captain Rizzo in the past about these use of force reports and how they're compiled and how people look at them. And I don't know if Dr. Spruill. Now, I've never seen the Q before. Is that something new in your name?
You know what? I think that was from I think I used this platform for my college when I did an interview.
Oh, okay.
So I think in there. Yeah.
All right. That just threw me for a minute there. Anyway, I don't know if you want to. I won't call you Q. I don't know if you want to take this or if you want to let Captain Rizzo do this, but just briefly. Well, first of all, as I said in the beginning, I showed a screenshot of the dashboard for the database, noting that Franklin was not in the list of towns. And as I said, it was my mistake, and I thought that was because from October to February there were no uses of force incidents reported. But Director Spruill, you have set me straight on that. So could you explain that a little bit?
So apparently, it's really the beta form of this database. So the information that the police officers input into the database for their use of force, it has to be done within 24 hours. So that's uploaded into the state portal and off it goes to the state. But they also have to further vet it and make sure, all the reports match, the number incident reports match, the officers' badge numbers, and a whole bunch of other technical things before they push it out to the other side. So due to some technical issues, ours did not make the first release, I'll say. We're hoping during the next update, our information is actually in the portal. But from October to the time that they're reporting, February of 2021, we've had 12 use of force incidents. And I will tell you that 8 of them are related to mental health. And the other 4 are related to like domestic violence, burglary, other weapons and serious crimes like that, where people were actively resisting. So I can say those numbers, they didn't surprise us because, we are taking the mantra of minimal force
Mhm.
necessary. It's just, let's face it, nowadays officers don't want to use force if they don't have to, because listen, the the citizens are at risk, innocent bystanders can be at risk, and the officers at risk. Officers sustain injuries as well, and it costs the town, it can cost, the insurance companies, it costs money for officers to get injured as well. So, it's just a trickle down effect when you have
Right.
forces used. So I will say this: during the entire 2020, we only had 15 incidents of use of force.
Hmm.
And again, the majority of those were mental health involved incidents. So it's a story that is telling about, when force is used and some of the reasons why in Franklin. And
Mhm.
that is what is leading us to think about doing some other things.
Okay. No, be a little more specific as to what types of force had to be used in those incidents?
Um, all of those were usually physical. Hands. Officers had to restrain people, arms, legs, things like that. On a few occasions, it was OC spray, but that's just a couple times. And I know Captain Rizzo, he studies those use of force reports. He probably can give us a few more details about those.
During the time frame that was reported by the Attorney General's office, we only use physical force, which would be restraint holds or other types of physical force uh, to restrain the individual. In the several instances throughout the year of 2020 where we did need to use mechanical force, which would be OC spray, that was the highest level of force that we used. So. Again, we take the mantra of the minimal amount of force to affect what we need to affect.
Okay. And OC stands for what?
Oleoresin capsicum, basically
Pepper
pepper juice.
spray.
Pepper juice.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a fancy word for pepper juice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and I take it that there were no serious injuries in those incidents?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. So given the fact that, and Director, I think you said that most of them were mental health calls.
Mhm.
All right.
Yes.
So let's just deviate just a little bit. Some of the police reforms that some folks are calling for have been calling for over the past year or two um, involve.
Defunding.
Well, no, not see. Defunding is not the right term. It's
No, it
reallocation
isn't.
of,
It's total misnomer, and I think
yeah,
this
it's
might be
reallocation
a
of
good
funds.
time
So
to just
what?
redefine what that has to do
Yeah,
with.
yeah. And what they're saying is maybe police shouldn't be dispatched for these mental health things. Maybe this should be mental health professionals, right? So what do you think about that? I mean, in light of the experiences that your
Mhm.
officers have had over the past X number of months.
So, I mean, I understand completely when citizens see it that way. But we talked about this before. Some of the technical issues with that is having, a certain amount of mental health professionals on call 24/7, just like the police department. Also, once the mental health professional goes in, and if they're in danger, they're going to end up having to call the police. And you have to remember, most times when there are mental health calls, it's not called in as it's a mental health call. It's called in as someone acting disorderly. And the
Mhm.
officers get there and they assess it and they recognize, okay,
Mhm.
this is not someone who's just destroying properties. This is someone who's having a crisis and they need
Mm,
to go to the hospital versus they need to be charged with disorderly conduct or ag assault or, destruction of property.
mhm,
So there is, it's a fine line, I'm going to say, because what will happen is, what we foresee anyway, is that the mental health professionals may go in and they may be in a certain amount of danger and also need the police officers as well, because
Mhm.
most times the person in crisis is not calling the police.
mm.
It's other
Mhm.
people in the family or in, who are in direct proximity to the person. So I say more training, That's why we're looking to have our officers trained in crisis intervention. And it's a very big commitment because it requires, 40 hours or more of training and recertification and things like that. But it's worth it because if we're seeing that's where the majority of our numbers are coming from, um, that's why, we see it is a priority and we are working on getting that training. But as you know, with COVID, a lot of training has been pulled back a little bit, but we're hoping it kicks back up now that things are trying to go back to somewhat normalcy.
Okay. Well, on that point, we have a question from a viewer. Erica Davis Truesdale asks, what training is taking place to handle mental health calls to minimize the trauma?
So Captain Rizzo is also our captain who is in charge of training.
Okay.
That and Bill, that's what we were saying before when you said internal affairs. Internal affairs is under the umbrella of professional standards.
Right.
Professional standards has to deal with training, accreditation, and internal affairs. So it's all under the umbrella.
Okay.
But training purposes, as the director said, we're looking to get officers certified in crisis intervention training, and that is a very big commitment. It's a 40-hour commitment. It's a very intensive class. We do take part in CLEAR training, which is run through the Attorney General's office, and that has for the last several years dealt with de-escalation and cultural sensitivity to other ethnic groups, as well as we have sent officers and have officers trained in autism awareness and de-escalation of individuals with developmental disabilities. So we have send any training opportunities we get. We are sending them, and with virtual platforms being what they are, we're trying to utilize them as well, and have been to great effect.
And let's not forget, like our crisis negotiation training. We've sent, an officer or two for that. I know we had one retire and we replaced him with another one. So that's important because they're trained in some of those skills as well to talk to people who are in crisis.
Okay.
What exactly is CLEAR training?
Director, you want to handle it? Or you want me to take that?
So, so CLEAR training. We have so many acronyms. So
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
we do. I'm trying to remember what it stands for, but it's
Hold on. I'm looking right now.
It's law enforcement. I can tell you what it is, though. It's law
Okay.
enforcement training that is geared toward, implicit bias, diversity training, dealing with people with mental, health issues, any type of social awareness issues. The CLEAR training program, it encompasses through the AG's office. And I am actually on one of the committees right now that is working on a new implicit bias training and cultural diversity awareness. So it's a very, very robust working group with a lot of different people, but I think they're going to come out with a very great product at the end, because I will tell you, at the end of that working group, I'm exhausted. So that means we're getting some good work done.
So just to piggyback off that, it is the Community Law Enforcement Affirmative Relations Commission, CLEAR Commission, and so far training that's been pushed out that our officers have received is train law enforcement in the African American community, law enforcement in the Muslim Islamic community, Asian community, Sikh community, Latino Hispanic community, Jewish community, LGBTQ community, as well as understanding bias, crimes, and incident reporting. So, and this is training that our officers have taken every year. These are, this is a very serious thing, and we take our training very seriously.
And they keep adding on to it. And as you know, in Franklin, we need all of that because our community is so diverse. Somerset County, Middlesex County, all the neighboring towns, it's so diverse. We definitely need to be more aware, all of us.
Just to backtrack a little bit. Well, first of all, April happens to be Celebrate Diversity Month, so it's appropriate that we're touching on that. But I kind of a basic thought about the law is the law is the law. how does diversity training have an impact here?
So I would say it helps you look at things differently. And, one of the things I love to bring up, like, sometimes I like to watch what I call mindless TV. And it's just kind of to just let yourself decompress. But for some reason, I always find a message in it. So I don't know if anyone out there in the world has ever watched The Last OG. And, it's a black female who's married to a white male. And her husband says to her, well, honey, you scare white people. So she goes, what do you mean by that? Like, she's very offended. And she
Mhm.
says, well, you say that because you don't understand what happens. And then they flash back and they give scenarios where she's locked her keys in her car, and then there's a white neighbor who's calling the police on her because she's like trying to get the doors open to get her keys out. So he
Hmm.
calls the police. And her husband walks out of the house and just sees her yelling at him. Like, call the police. I don't believe you're like, she's being very aggressive. Or he comes into a store looking for her and she's yelling at the clerk, but he doesn't understand. The clerk just waited on another person in front of her who wasn't of color and didn't ask them for ID to purchase something. She goes to
Wow.
purchase something with her credit card. The clerk asks her for ID or says something like, are you sure you can afford this? So she gets
Oh my
pissed
God.
off and she's yelling at the
Right,
clerk.
right.
So and her husband just sees her being aggressive. So the point is, like, our officers, the diversity training helps them see, like, if you walk into a situation, it may not be what it seems. You may see a black male or black woman yelling at someone. You have to take a minute and find out what's the story, not automatically assume, the victim is the victim or the subject is the subject. You have to assess it. You can't just look at someone and say, oh, obviously she's the aggressive one. I
Mhm.
stopped playing a video game for that reason. There used to be a
Wow.
little mindless game on my phone that I would play, Dinner Dash, and they had customers that would come in, and the black females were the impatient ones. So you had to serve them quickly because they had bad attitudes and they were impatient and they would leave and wouldn't leave a tip.
Wow.
Wow. So it's
Yes.
actually the acclimating of the police
Mhm.
force to the nuances that have to be made aware of.
Yeah, and you just
So
so you know,
that
people
preconceived notions are not the basis of your
exactly.
interaction.
Exactly. And people are people. And you want people to understand the different plights that people deal with.
Hmm.
Just because you see someone with a turban, you don't ask them, do they speak English?
Right.
You know, these are things that happen, in societies. So
Hmm.
it teaches our officers to be more aware, and it gives them examples of things that we hope they have an aha moment and they recognize some things that they may have thought or other people around them have thought, and they can clarify that for us too. Yep.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
but what I was driving at is that a crime in progress is regardless of diversity. That was just the point that I was, and
It
very
can be,
often I'd
but
like to bring it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it can be, but if you see a black male crawling through a window and you pull up, are you gonna assume he's a burglar or a homeowner who locked himself out of his residence?
Well, again, that's across the board. I hate to keep harping on this. Uh, you can't make the assumption that anything, regardless of the diversity situation, is what it is. And that is
Exactly.
the obligation of the
Yep.
officer to see what the situation appears to be and to get the rest of the story. That's,
Mhm.
I feel that the diversity training is almost insulting.
Well, I mean, you say that, but it's at the same time, some people say we don't do it enough. And it could be insulting to some because listen, let's face it, if I'm sitting there, I feel like, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't act like that. I don't behave like that. Then guess what? It's a good training. You've
Hmm.
recognized it,
Hmm.
you've seen it, you're
Hmm.
aware of it. If it's not you, it's not you. But guess what?
Sure.
Maybe you'll see it in someone else. Maybe they be your partner, had it be another citizen or a family member, but you recognize it and you know it exists. So we can't
Hmm.
just close our eyes to it and say, you know, well, it's not me. I don't need to see it. I
Sure.
think everyone needs to be aware.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a segue into what I see and have heard before. The bottom line to any of these requirements is always at the officer's discretion. That there are certain principles that are adherent to this particular beta plan, which is almost an alpha plan. And I'd like to just mention what those portions are to this documentation, and they have it, or the document has it in order of sanctity of life, de-escalation, proportional force, deadly force as a last resort, the duty to intervene, medical emergency and monitoring any of the injured, and the duty to report all use of force as incidents. The one that strikes me right now, of course, because of headlines that have happened, is the duty of intervention by fellow officers when they see one of their own utilizing deadly force. Now, I know that there's not a federally mandated operational handbook, but I know in New Jersey it exists. The duty to intervene. You see a fellow officer behaving in a way that is, totally excessive. What goes on? I mean, what's the process? And again, we know that the officer's discretion is to preserve the sanctity of life of all concerned.
Mm-hmm. So what is the process for duty to intervene?
Well, what's even the thought process? I know it's fast.
So can I tell you this? Duty to intervene, the Attorney General made it a formal process, and he made it a directive. He made it an order. He made it's supposed to be uniform for everyone. Duty to intervene has always existed. We were taught that if you see an officer doing anything wrong, whether it be too much force against a subject, whether it be stealing something, whatever, you're required to intervene. You're required to report it. You're required. I mean, technically, you could arrest the officer if you watch the officer commit a crime. Mm-hmm. So it's always been there. And if you don't do it, it's official misconduct. So I think the Attorney General just, upped the ante by defining it, clarifying it, and saying this is what we're all required to do. And, working in the prosecutor's office, we investigated cases where, officers, stood by and did nothing. And we have them on video standing by doing nothing at the time when something was happening, another officer was doing it. So it's not new. It was official misconduct then, it's official misconduct now. And on top of that, the AG just, stated it. You have a duty. He restated it, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Well, you hear so frequently of the blue line, and I'm just happy to hear that that's continuing to be enforced, because it's necessary. It's just necessary. Yeah. But we've had this conversation with Darren yourself when he was a lieutenant, and his own incidents required split-second discretion and proportionate force to the proportion of the crime. And it is still, the bottom line is always the officer's discretion. Now, that brings us back to the training. How do you train for split-second decisions like that? I mean, you have all these, you have the basic information, you have skill sets and physical training and all of the principles that you have to adhere to. How do you prepare anyone for a split-second decision like that?
You really prepare them the best way you can. Unfortunately, you're preparing for something that it's not like you're preparing for a test where there's questions and answers. There's the human factor, like you've said. So humans are predictably unpredictable. We can train. We try to train our officers, and we do train our officers to deal with fluid situations. We make sure that when we're doing practical training, that we don't do the same thing over and over. To get you want them to do the same thing over and over for muscle memory, but we give them a different scenario so that they have to use their thought process before they just go into muscle memory. Mm-hmm. So it's not just classroom training; it is hands-on training, and and that's the only way you can. You train them to deal the best way they can with the situations that are at hand.
And we do a lot of practical training. I mean, they have the firearm simulation machine, which you know, teaches you things that you learn about yourself, things that make you nervous or things that make you pause or things that you should pause. And, the biggest teacher is experience. And when you do those training exercises, you never make the same mistakes twice. Um, I can remember just being in the academy, some things, um, we would practice doing search warrants. And, one time we had the exterior perimeter, we thought we had a break, and, the instructors jumped out the window. So, you know, so, and that stuck in my head. Every time I went on a search warrant, I was like, you know what? You're on the perimeter. Someone can't jump out the window. Don't think they're just going to walk in and out through the door. So,
Right.
those are things that you don't forget. One time we found someone hiding in a pile of dirty laundry. You don't forget that. You prepare yourself for certain things. So it is experience and it is practice. And that's why we try during most of our trainings to have practical training, not just classroom training, because, the officers need that as well. And they need someone to critique them, because the purpose is if you make a mistake once, you won't make it twice.
That's for sure.
All right. You want to try to get the muscle memory to de-escalate, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we teach them how to.
De-escalation,
I'm sorry.
de-escalation is always our first option. De-escalation and space and distance are always the first option. Talking is always the first option. And actually, if you look in the use of force guidelines, the first thing that you have is just our physical presence and our words. That's our first line of defense, and that's what we use on every single call for service every day. And thank goodness that is most of the time all we need. The vast majority of the contacts that we have with the community and peacefully and with everybody smiling or going their separate way, however they need to. But the vast majority of incidents don't end in the use of force.
That's good.
Yes.
So Captain Rizzo, while we have you, you and I have offline have spoken about this in the past a number of times. Talk about the pitfalls that could be presented by this kind of a database, by this kind of raw information just being thrown out there as it is.
And again, we have had this conversation, and it's really when there's no context given.
For a moment. Sorry.
There's no context given to just raw data. Conclusions can be drawn. So that's why we're glad to have these types of conversations. So again, the director can clarify the fact that the vast majority of the times we're having to use force is a minimal amount of force to de-escalate or get someone medical help. Or some other type of violent felon that we've used a minimal amount of force on. If there's no context put to the actual reason that force was used, or what was going on prior to that, it just allows for conclusions to be drawn that might not be factual and can quite frankly skew the way that things are viewed.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't there an issue about if there are multiple officers involved in one incident, each of those officers have to file their own report, and maybe that could lead to some misconceptions about what actually actually is going on the police force?
And that's part of what the issue is with the beta version, that yes, every officer who uses force has to fill out their own use of force report. But they're attached to one incident. So that's part of what the Attorney General's office is getting in line with the database, going to that second where they're vetting the forms, because they don't want to have the amount of incidents attached to an agency seem so elevated, where you could have, say for it says 40, but there were really only maybe 15 incidents or 16 incidents, but there happened to be multiple officers on the scene, and it took multiple officers to restrain that individual. While each one of those get their own report, and the officers would be reported within the database, that could skew the numbers to make it look like that agency uses force much more often than it actually does.
Right. And that is a danger of this database as it exists now, right? People could look at that and say, "Oh my God, look at all this stuff that's going on in town. These cops are out of control."
And again, that's why they've rolled it out in the beta version so that they can work that kink out to make sure that it's reported accurately.
You think something like this that could lead to these kinds of wrong conclusions, let's put it that way, wrong conclusions. You think they would have waited a little bit of time before they rolled it out? Why would they put out you put out a beta version of software to make sure that you get the kinks out, have people test it for you? Something like this, you think you'd wait till you got those kinks out before you put it out already?
Well, it's similar to the emergency use authorization with vaccinations right now. You have a situation where the principles are pretty much fundamentally in place, and then the rest of the story.
Yeah, maybe.
I think that, again, this current Attorney General and this administration and our administration are dedicated to transparency. We had, you've been dealing with me for many years, Bill, and I'm all about transparency, and I think that the reason this was rolled out was in an effort to to show that there's transparency, and I really think that was kind of what they were going for.
Yeah, I can understand that. We have another question here from Cheryl Harris Wallace. Do you hire officers that live in the community? And if not, why not? I would imagine familiarity would minimize fear, perhaps build more community compassion.
So, yes. The simple answer is yes. So we do look for officers in the community. I mean, the last, we're going to say year, we're going on our second year, the issue has been, finding police academies and things like that. And it is a big investment to call a test, select officers, send them to the academy, wait for them to finish the academy. So we have been trying to hire officers that are from the community, and we've done that. I think right now I know we've had at least 1 or 2 hires that have come from right here in Franklin. Since I've been here, I'm sorry, I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but I know we've had 1 female and 1 male, and we are looking at other officers from the community to come work with us. Our constraints right now is we're looking for officers who are experienced or in the academy right now. Some of them are going through alternate route, and we're looking at them as well. So we try to hire people that are from the community or from similar communities, nearby communities, and are very familiar with the people that reside in and around Franklin and Somerset County and Middlesex County, Union County, or neighboring communities. We do try that. We don't restrict that. That's not the only thing, but we are looking at people like that. Yes.
You just had a little, as I recall, maybe a month or 2 ago, you had a real push for people to apply, right?
I still have a push. So if you know anyone out there who is looking to go through alternate route or is a class 2, which is a SLEO 2 officer, who lives in town or nearby town, that also helps. Because I think, the more familiar you are with people and places, the better you can do. I don't want to put some of our officers out there like that, but they're here. We have some officers from town. We do.
Just real quick, what is the alternate route?
So the alternate route program is a program that's run through the various police academies, and basically it's almost like you pay for a semester of college. Someone would sponsor themselves to go through the police academy. They pay their own way through the police academy. They receive training, and when they graduate with their what's called our Class A Police Training Certificate, or PTC, and that's basically the certificate that all police officers have to have. And by paying their own way through, they make themselves more marketable as far as picking up a job with an agency, because now an agency does not have to pay for them to go through the academy.
You know what that cost is?
I believe it's roughly $5,000 depending on the academy you go to, but that's actually just the tuition. They have to pay for their own physical, their own psychological exam, their own background check. So
Is that much?
I believe so.
Okay.
Interesting. So staying with this idea of hiring, excuse me, of hiring local, do you think that having folks who, not just Franklin, but just in general, do you think that having folks who grew up in a community and then become police officers in that community, do you think that would have any kind of a mitigating effect on the use of force? I mean, they may know these people for years, right? And do you think that might have some sort of calming effect?
I think it could have a calming effect in the fact that if you have someone who lives in the community and they've known someone their entire lives, there is that that camaraderie that they may already have, even though they may have gone their separate ways. They know each other. Again, there could be that situation of that could escalate a situation, but again, we're dealing with the human factor. So I definitely think whenever you have that issue, or not the issue, the idea of familiarity and knowledge, that's always going to be a beneficial factor.
It all boils down to how you deal with people too. It really does. I mean, you have to know how to deal with people in general. That's the first skill. But I know that the officers that we do have that are from here, most of the community love them, and it helps.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So let's talk about the tools of force, I guess you'd say. There's obviously the incident in Minnesota is topmost on people's minds, where an officer, 26-year veteran, mistook her service weapon for a taser and killed a young man.
Allegedly. Well, not the alleged.
No, not allegedly.
But
allegedly mistook the taser for the gun, right?
The two.
How prevalent? I shouldn't say how prevalent is that. How do you guys make sure that doesn't happen in Franklin Township?
So here's two things. Our officers are trained to let it go. I mean, and I don't want a Monday morning quarterback. I said this to you, but in that situation, they could have waited. They knew who he was. I haven't heard that he was wanted for murder or rape or any type of aggravated assault or had a weapon. So they knew who he was. He wanted to get back in the car, resist. They could have let him go, and they could have went and got him later. And we have all actually commended our officers on doing things like that. Someone takes off, they let them go, and then they hand it over to the detective bureau, and the detectives actually, get further information, and then they go out and arrest the person later. That's how it's supposed to be done. I mean, that's what we're taught to do. In that situation, there was no reason, for the gun to come out. He was just trying to get away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and like I said, unless he was a murderer or rapist or, had committed some heinous crime like that, other than that, there was no reason to do that.
Right. And the taser is different. Well, it's a different weight and it's a different color than a Glock. Yeah.
And totally different shape, and it's usually encased in some sort of plastic with a bright
and it's
color.
on the other, and it's on the other side of your firearm also.
Right. It's on your weak hand, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. It's good to know that you guys are addressing that issue as well. And yeah, it's just a matter. I guess it's a matter of taking a deep breath and just assessing the situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you think back to a lot of the incidents that have happened, like Eric Gartner, and a lot of these incidents, if someone had just took a moment,
Mhm.
and we've had emotional intelligence training wrapped around that, and that is the premise of it, to take a beat, take a breath, and assess, okay, what is this really right here before me? Is it that serious? Is it a clash of ego? Is it just that I have to win mentality? Or is it something that can wait? Is there something I can do different? Can I add humor into this to calm, or can how can I calm the person down?
Mhm.
Because sometimes, we forget that that is our job too, to calm people down. And that's one of the things, and I'm sure, Phil, we go back a ways, but they taught you in the academy that one of the key things, I've never had anyone resist or take off on me on an arrest because I made them feel calm about it.
Mhm.
Mm.
I made them realize this is not the end of the world. This is what's going to happen. We're going to go back. We're going to do some paperwork. You're going to go home eventually.
Right.
And that's all we want to do right here.
So you've never had one of those moments? I forgot the name of the television show, but William Shatner was a police officer, and the opening segments where there's a guy running down the sidewalk, and he takes out his billy club. In fact, it was a billy club, and he kind of sidearms it down the street and
He just took a TJ Hooker moment.
TJ Hooker, right, catches the guy in the crook of his knees. Never had that. Okay.
So if I could just piggyback off what the director has stated, I think a good portion of our success deals with our first line supervisors. We have a new cadre of first line supervisors, and the director has made sure that we have given them a great deal of training, and they know what's expected of them and their personnel. And I think they take a very, without without micromanaging, they're taking a very hands-on approach to their personnel, and I think that that plays a great part in the way we handle our calls.
And guess what? I've heard citizens say, oh, why two cars come up? Why is there a third car? Let me tell you something. When you see the second car that's back up, and plus we can't ride in cars together because of COVID. When you see that third car, that's customer service, because that is that supervisor who is going to make sure they do everything they're supposed to do right. You want that supervisor on the scene, and we've made it a policy that there's one supervisor at least on the road at all times. During an overlap, it could be 2 or 3. So that's how we want it.
Okay. When a use of force incident happens and an officer comes back into the headquarters, what happens? I mean, they fill out the report, and does anything else happen besides that? Do you sit him down, Captain, and have a chat, or her down and have a chat and find out what happened?
So what happens is that report is reviewed not only by their first line supervisor, but then what happens with those incidences? There's what's called a meaningful review by detectives within the internal affairs unit, professional standards, and we ensure that that our officers are doing everything consistent with policies, procedures, and best practices. So there is that command level review, and once that's done, it's signed off on by multiple levels of command. So there are a lot of eyes and hands on that report and that incident, including the reviewing of MVRs and ultimately body cam footage that will be coming soon, and the scrutinization of the police report to make sure that everything is in line, and that's just another level of protection that we put in there, not only for our officers but for the community.
All right. And MVR is what, the dash
mobile video, the dash cam mobile video recorders in the cars.
Okay. So what happens if you go through the review and you say, you know, and you stepped over the line there. Maybe this wasn't really justified. What happens then?
Well, again, if there's a situation where you have an excessive use of force, that would trigger an internal affairs investigation, and that would be investigated, and discipline would be meted out as necessary. You could have a situation where someone, maybe while you're reviewing the video, you find that they used a harsh word that they shouldn't have used. At that point, that would be an on-the-spot admonishment and dealt with there. But again, there's reviews at every level to make sure that our officers are conducting themselves in the most professional manner as possible.
Okay, and do you guys, you know, it happens unfortunately way too often, but when something happens in another part of the country, do you kind of use that and look at and see what could have been the underlying reason for that incident, and then take it back internally and say, okay, what are we doing, or what can we do to train to make sure this doesn't happen here in Franklin? Do you use examples from Minneapolis or Texas or wherever it could be to make sure that that things are good here?
So our training staff, including our firearms staff who do use of force and other things, they do research. They're constantly gathering research, and we actually have daily training. We have roll call training every day. Our sergeants pick a topic and they provide roll call training every day, and we've encouraged them, pull these videos, take 15 minutes, you know, while you're in briefing to discuss these incidents and say what went right, what went wrong, and they're encouraged to do that, and they're empowered to do that. So we're not about recreating the wheel. If there's something out there and it's a teaching tool that we can use, we will.
Okay. And how is that received by the cops, by the patrol people? I mean, the ones who are getting the training, are they receptive to that, or is there any kind of resistance to being told don't do this?
No, I think that, you know, they want to look at the, you know, everybody has the same goal, and that's that everyone goes home safe at the end of the night. Officers and citizens included, everyone goes home at the end of the night, and they go home safely. And that is our number one goal. Every officer's goal is that. So I've yet to hear an officer say, "Oh, that training was BS," and we because it's another, as you said it's another tool on your tool belt. It's if you pick one little thing out of a training class and you're able to apply that on the street, that training class was worthwhile.
And we work with our PBA as well. You know, they actually come to us and say that the officers, they're welcoming more training. You know, they want to do live training. They don't want just, you know, to review PowerPoints or a memo. You know, they want to be able to do it live and ask questions and talk with the instructors about, you know, what's going on, because that is how we learn, by talking with the instructors and learning from other people's experiences, whether it's within our agency or another agency as well.
Okay. I've dominated the questions, PJ. You must have something.
Well, I was just thinking about an article that I'd read this morning about a former journalist who happens to be a black man, and under the heading of driving while black, he is now instructing his children and his friends that they should have dash cameras, and take out your wallet so it's in plain sight. Take out your insurance information so there's no question, if you are stopped by an officer, what your intent is in moving your hands around. What would be your comment to that sort of instruction? I mean, that pre-fear to make sure there are no mitigating circumstances that can be misinterpreted.
So I am a member of, I mean, you know, this, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And last Friday, we had not a new training, but they reinvented it because of COVID. This can be done virtually now. It's called The Law in Your Community. And the premise behind that was the motor vehicle stop. That's how it started. So a couple of us took that training to train the trainers so that we could do that training for, young people and adults.
Mhm.
And I would say, that should be everyone. Everyone should do the same thing. Like, when you get in your car, I mean, I was always taught to be ready. Check whether or not you have the registration and insurance card.
Mhm.
Um, know where your wallet is. Know, if you get stopped. Okay, I'm in law enforcement. I, when I'm getting in my car, I know where my wallet is, where my driver's license is. And, we have to go a step further. If you're armed, you have to say, notify the officer that, you're armed and you're who you are and why you're armed and have your ID and credentials ready. It's just a
Mhm.
part of life. So I think, all people when they're driving, they should know that. And I can imagine and I understand the angst that young Black men and Black men in general have because seeing what's happening throughout the country,
Exactly.
to have that feeling, to know that, listen, I have an 18-year-old son, he just got his
Mhm.
license, and I probably lectured to him too much, but,
No,
you know,
I don't think it's too much because
yeah,
the statistics, there
if,
20% higher incidences of
yeah,
being stopped.
well, PJ, he would say it's too much. I started when he was about 10. So,
Okay, so he's well schooled. But okay, but that does bring me back to you feeling the necessity to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's
just, and,
exactly.
can I say, I don't want, and I say this to my son. Yes, the officers in our town. Yes, the officers, who mommy might know. Yes, you might know a certain group, but listen, they're young people. They want to travel outside of here. I
Of
don't know
course.
what every single place is going to be like what we're
Mhm.
used to and what he's used to. He's like used to saying, "Hey, officer so and so, you go to other places." I've been to other places, the officers aren't that friendly. So, I have that fear. Like, if he travels outside of our, you know,
Your
square
circle,
mile here,
of course,
you know,
of course.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think that would be a stellar idea just to start enforcing that for anyone. Have your credentials if you should happen to be stopped. It could be for a tail light, or maybe your tire is looking a little low on the highway, and the officer is there to help you. The perception is frequently, "Uh-oh, what did I do?" It's not necessarily that this officer is there for benevolence, uh, but I would think, hey, this is a good idea. Let's make sure that we have anything that we could possibly need that an officer could possibly require at the ready so that my hands are visible. Then there's no misconception. And I'm certainly not minimizing the danger that any police officer faces going up to a strange car as well.
Hmm.
And I think the bottom line fear is that
Yeah.
either side behind that glass could raise a weapon.
Hmm.
So, PJ, I'm just going to tell you that I have a 16-year-old daughter who is about to get her permit, and her mom and I
Mm,
have been preaching that to her.
good.
Make sure
Good.
you have all of your stuff available. So, it is a good lesson to have.
And it makes the officers feel at ease too when you behave a certain way, when you know what's going to happen during a traffic stop.
Right.
That is part of the law in your community training too, to make people aware, okay, this is what happens during a traffic stop, and this is normal. So that they
Hmm.
also know what's not normal if you
Yeah.
get some road cop who does something that's not normal. You
Hmm.
know, if they're telling you to get out of the car and walk 10 feet that way for, and you just have to be aware. And I think you can't educate the public enough
Hmm.
about how to interact with the police and vice versa. We train for it. Why shouldn't the citizens train for it? Because it could happen. Anyone
I
could
think
get
that's
stopped while they're
a
driving.
That
fine
should be.
idea to establish some sort of a citizen training as
Well,
to how to behave.
high
Since
school.
traffic stops and traffic violations are becoming just so prevalent right now, that
Hmm.
I think that would be a wonderful thing to
It should
initiate.
be part of driver's ed in high school. I mean, I was taught what if you
But
get pulled over.
conducted by the police. Right.
Yeah, you get pulled over. You pull over. You put the car in park. You turn off your radio. You turn on your interior light. You get your stuff, your car, your wall, whatever, and then you put your hands on the steering wheel, and you open your window and you put your hands on the steering wheel and you wait.
I'm going to show Bill. I'm with you because I knock on wood, have not and don't get pulled over a lot. But the last time I did, that was the exact thing that I did.
That's what you do.
Mhm.
Because then the cop
That's-
looks at you and he sees you. He can see your hands mainly,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
there's no loud music coming out, so there's no way there's going to be any kind of miscommunication. And you're sitting there nice and calm, and I can say that because I'm a white guy, and I don't have that experience of young black men where in some areas of even where I grew up, it wasn't that easy for them.
So,
There's an automatic assumption.
and
I grew up in the 70s. That's when I got my license. So there's an automatic assumption. Well, if you were black or if you had long hair, that you probably had drugs in the car.
mm,
So they were gonna give you they were gonna hassle you, based on that. But
and let's not forget, guys, that's the ideal. You know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of people on both sides that don't get it right. But it is the cop's job to perform that function correctly. When they pull someone over, and to try and make it an educating experience and not a traumatic experience.
Right.
So that is our job, and that's what we teach our officers. Like, it's about educating them, drivers, not traumatizing them, but educating them, no matter what the situation is.
Well, I
and
think the public has a responsibility too to know what is required and what is expected,
Mhm.
and
True.
their own level of training. I really would like to go back to maybe that could happen at Franklin, that there is citizens training. What
Yeah.
do you do? What is the proper demeanor if you are being stopped for whatever reason? How do you need to be prepared? How do you address an officer? Do you wait for the officer to address you? Where do you put your hands?
Right.
What do you do?
The problem that we have, PJ, is some people are already traumatized. So,
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
you're starting from a point of, getting over some things that happened before, whether it be what you saw in the media or what happened to you personally. So that's why the Lanya community it takes a different spin, because it doesn't just tell the idealistic part about it. It talks to the young people about how to move forward, what should happen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that was quite exhaustive and very informative, and I hope that we have put out this information to the Franklin Township residents, that the Franklin Township Police Department is on top of this issue of use of force and skews toward de-escalation as opposed. What's the phrase that people use now? Police officers ought to be servants rather than warriors. I think that's what they're.
Guardians, not warriors.
Guardians rather than warriors. Right. Guardians rather than warriors. And I from
But
what
in
I've
Franklin
heard,
Township,
from what I've
warrior
heard,
is a plus.
they're exact. Well, that's different.
There's your dichotomy right there.
That's different. But I think from what we've heard this evening is that philosophy is taken to heart by the Franklin Township Police Department, and it's a good thing. So that's good. PJ, you have anything else you want to ask?
Well, not that I want to ask, but I think I just want to state that we, as citizens, take it for granted that every time a police officer walks out the door with that uniform on, he or she is taking his life in his hands, and he or she does not really know he or she is coming home at the end of the day. It is an act of bravery on every single level, and an act of trust in your own ability and training, that you'll know how to handle whatever comes up during the day. It's an astronomically responsible and scary profession, and I thank you both and the representation that you have in the Franklin Township Police Department for protecting us the way you do.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Well, Public Safety Director Covella Q. Spruill and Captain Phil Rizzo from the Franklin Township Police Department, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us again. You're both, Captain. I think you've been on the program before, but I know Director Spruill has, but I think Captain Rizzo's been on with us, right, PJ? Yeah.
And,
so
and your
thank you.
willingness to keep the public, the Franklin Township public, informed as things
Yes.
grow and develop.
And
It's tremendous.
I have to say, Captain Rizzo mentioned something about being his mantra is transparency. I've been doing community journalism on and off, well, mostly on, since about 1983, and I can say that Captain Rizzo is not, if not the most transparent, one of the most transparent public information officers I've ever dealt with. So
Absolutely.
on
So
that,
we'll have our Tuesday night talks. We'll be
yes,
doing that soon.
great.
Yes.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do. We do watch. So thank
Yeah.
you again for coming on, and we will see you again.
All right. Take care.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Okay. Well, that was interesting. That was fun. It was very eye-opening, and I just don't get why the Attorney General would put out a beta thing and have it open to such misinterpretations as it could, because there are cop haters out there, and you know they will latch on to this information and not really care what the facts are.
But I guess half the pie that might be utilizable at the moment
Yeah.
is better than not having a pie at all. And again, I'll make that comparison to the emergency use authorization that exists right now in
Or the
COVID
vaccines.
vaccinations.
Yeah,
They
sure.
aren't FDA approved, but nonetheless, they've adhered to rigorous standards that apparently it's okay under an emergency use authorization umbrella.
Mhm.
So I would think that there's a similar interpretation with this.
Yeah. Well, it was good to hear
get
that.
it out there. And this is not a new situation. This has been out in its present form for several months.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about that, but
Oh, yeah, it's December.
it was just announced. Well, it was just announced like,
It was reannounced.
yeah, re-announced. At any rate,
Anyway, it never hurts to just elucidate.
yeah.
And especially in light of what's going on throughout the country, that things are well taken care of here in Franklin Township.
Yeah, I think there's I think we've been given some pretty good assurances that they're on top of current events,
Mhm.
to quote a honeymooners line. They are aware of what's going on elsewhere in the country, and they're using those incidents as teaching incidents for our own officers to make sure that nothing like that happens here. And
Yeah,
you know,
I would like to see some kind of citizen teachings about what to do when you're stopped.
no, that'd be a
What's
good.
the right thing to do here,
Yeah,
folks?
that'd be a good
And not
form.
just for kids.
No, that'd be a good form, but you have to get them. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure they have driver's ed in the high school. That's where you get them, right? That's when you teach. I think that's where I was taught in my high school. I think my driver's ed teaches this is what you do if you get pulled over.
I have never been taught that.
No,
I don't think I have ever put my hands on top of a steering wheel.
put your hands on the steering wheel so they can see your, because you know they don't know what they're walking into. They don't know.
Exactly.
And I don't blame them. I mean,
everyone's
that's got to be one of the most. That's gonna be one of the scariest things to do, to walk up to a car that you don't know what's going on, especially if the windows are tinted and they're not supposed to be in this state. It's against the law, and and I see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you know they can't enforce every single thing. But yeah, you know, if I'm an officer and I can't see into a car, I put my spotlight on that car. I can't see into it. I'm making sure that all those windows are down and everybody in that car has their hands out the windows before I get out of my car. I don't know if that's a training or not, but that's what I would do anyway. I mean,
there's
because
the
you know,
other part
I
of
ain't
it.
brief.
I mean, there's a reason that the tinted windshields are outlawed. It
course
also
there
doesn't
is.
stop that they exist.
Right.
But I think it's just interesting. I know, and I've been stopped a couple of times. I have been stopped a couple of times. Let's just leave it at that. And every time, the minute I see the light, and for the most part, unless it's something mechanical that I'm not aware of, for the most part, I'm kind of, yeah, okay. Yes, I was.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So immediately I'm in the bag, I'm pulling out my wallet, I'm anticipating the registration and the insurance and the driver's license. Okay, but then once I have that handy, I still, and I will now start to be doing that, I have yet to ever put my hands on the steering wheel to show that my hands were not holding on to something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've never done that. I'm going to do that now.
Puts everybody at ease.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And hopefully you don't have a cop.
Interesting. Just really interesting.
Yeah. But anyway,
the little things that we can do. But this could
Yeah.
should be aimed at adults
Yeah.
who then pass the information down to their kids.
But let's not be naive. There are, there are some, not in Franklin, but there are some people who wear a badge who have biases and who have prejudices and who have chips on their shoulder about certain people and certain things. And
Mhm.
you can have your hands on the steering wheel and lights on and everything hunky dory, and they're still going to hassle you, and things could get ugly. That's just because they probably shouldn't be wearing a badge, and it happens. And that's never been my. Let me think. Nah, yeah, well, yeah, maybe I have. I have run into cops like that in the past, but they're not. They were not on the force for very long after that. So, yeah. So again, this database, once they get the kinks out, I think is going to be a good thing, because it's going to show transparency. It's going to show if a police department has an issue, has a problem. And as Captain Rizzo says, you've got to take these things in context. As Director Sproul pointed out, most of those incidents that will eventually show up on that database for Franklin for that time period were mental health issues. So,
Mhm.
you got someone who's ranting and raving, you may have to subdue them for some reason, and but there were no, he said the worst of it was pepper spray, and that's pretty bad, but nobody got
Well, they're
shot.
talking about proportional force.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah, proportion. And that's what you learn, right? When you are an officer, or when you're talking about self-defense, you're the proportionality of your response. If someone calls you an idiot, you can't stab them. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So, you have anything else you want to point out?
No, I've lived in Franklin for a while, and I know personally, whenever there's been an issue, that I've asked for police assistance within minutes.
Yeah.
Within minutes, they're
Very
responsive
very responsive.
and extremely proportional to the situation, and the primary use of keeping things lawful has always been the officer's discretion to keep it de-escalated.
Mm-hmm.
If you can talk about it, if you can just soothe it out by being soothing,
Yeah,
oftentimes
that's all it takes.
negates any further action.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, Franklin, that was the Franklin News Hour for April 15th, 2021. Again, you want to find out what's going on in town, go cruise on your computer to the mothership, which is www.franklinreporter.com. You can also get news updates on Twitter at Franklin Editor. We are on the Insta, Franklin_reporter_and_advocate. And if you have a news tip or a complaint or any kind of a comment for what's written, what appears on the website or in the newspaper or on the Facebook page or in a live stream or on the news hour, or gosh, who knows what's going to happen in the future. Please email me at editor@franklinreporter.com. And if you would like to support any of the aforementioned endeavors with advertising, please email PJ at ads@franklinreporter.com.
just a little aside on that the Franklin Reporter news content is what drives any one of our publications, which includes the 24/7 website at franklinreporter.com and the monthly digest, which is a print vehicle distributed throughout the community, as well as the news hour that you just watched, as well as the many live streams that we do in the community for enlightenment and charitable functioning, and our email blast every day, which you can subscribe to at no charge by going to the Franklin Reporter homepage, and at no charge you'll get an email as to the day's top stories. All of these things keep Franklin informed about Franklin. And when we started the Franklin Reporter, that was the mission: bring Franklin to Franklin. And you, as an advertiser, have the benefit of the interest of this community wanting to know what that information is. And as they read the news, they're reading your advertising as well. So please do not hesitate to take advantage of that. We have become, thankfully, a force. We have been told, I'm not about to toot our own horn, but I have been thanked, Bill has been thanked for making a difference. And that just, that fills my heart. It really does. I live here too. And on that note, we are also looking to expand our advertising force. So please, ads at franklinreporter.com if you'd like to send me a resume. That we're looking for somebody who loves the community, but also has a personality who gets why advertising makes a difference in your business. So on that happy little note, Mr. Bowman.
Well, Franklin, as usual, until we meet again, stay safe. PJ, say what you say.
I say thank you, Franklin. This is PJ Parker from the Franklin Reporter and Advocate. And I'm saying we'll be back.
Take care.